People think danger announces itself. A noise, a shadow, a warning that comes loud enough to run from. That's the lie we tell ourselves so we can sleep. The truth is, real danger waits until you feel safe. It watches while you unpack. It listens while you convince yourself nothing is wrong. And when it finally moves, it does so quietly that by the time you notice, you're already part of the plan. This isn't a story about breaking in. It's a story about being let in. I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd survived something. I woke up thinking I'd made a mistake, one I could still explain away. That's the trick. If you can explain it, you don't have to accept it. But some things don't want to be explained. They want to be normalized. A moved object, a camera glitch, a message that knows too much. At first, the story sounds harmless. Dog sitting, a quiet town, a couple going on vacation. That's the reverse genre at work. You think this is about isolation. You think it's about paranoia. You think the danger comes from outside the house. You're wrong. The scariest part isn't that someone was inside. It's that they never needed to hide. They weren't sneaking. They were testing. Every step I took after that first night was guided, subtly, patiently, toward a decision I didn't know I was being pushed to make. And the moment I understood what they wanted, I was already standing too close to the door. This is what happened. The chair weighed at least 40 pounds. I know because I could barely push it across the floor that night. I wedged it against the doggy door before I went to sleep, making absolutely sure those dogs couldn't get out. When I woke up the next morning, that chair was sitting in the corner, 5 feet away. The dogs were outside, and I was alone in a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere. That was the moment I knew someone had been inside while I was sleeping. But what I didn't know yet was that they were still watching, that they'd been watching the entire time, and that I was about to walk right into whatever they had planned. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I was 23 when I moved to that small town in rural Illinois. It was 2017, and I'd just taken a remote job that let me work from anywhere. The problem was, I didn't know anyone except Clara, a friend from college who'd moved there a year earlier. The town was one of those places where everyone knew everyone. Population, maybe 2,000. Most folks were retired or close to it. There wasn't much for someone my age to do, and as an introvert, making friends felt nearly impossible. Clara knew I was struggling. One afternoon, she called and said she had an opportunity for me. "There's this couple I know," she said. "They need a dog sitter for a week. Pays decent, and honestly, it might be a good way to meet people." I wasn't sure how dog sitting would help me meet people, but I needed the money and something to do besides stare at my laptop screen 14 hours a day. We set up a meeting at their house the following Saturday. The place was a 70s-style brick ranch, the kind you see all over the Midwest. Faded brown brick, narrow windows, a long gravel driveway that disappeared into the trees. The yard was huge, maybe 2 or 3 acres, and backed right up against dense woods. When the couple opened the door, I'll admit, my first impression wasn't great. They were both in their early 50s, I'd guess. The husband was tall and broad-shouldered, with thinning gray hair and a face that didn't change much when he smiled. The wife was smaller, thin, with sharp features and eyes that never seemed to blink. They welcomed me in, friendly enough. But something felt off. As I spoke, trying to make small talk and ask about the dogs, neither of them made eye contact. Instead, they'd look me up and down, scanning, like they were sizing me up for something. not in a judgmental way, more like inventory. The tour of the house didn't help. They'd open a door, step aside, and just let me look. No explanation, no commentary, just silence. I'd peek into a bedroom or bathroom, nod, and they'd close the door and move on. The house itself was dark and outdated. Wood paneling on the walls, old brown carpet, yellowed linoleum in the kitchen. In some places, the wallpaper was peeling. A couple of door frames looked warped, like the house was slowly sinking into the ground. But what really stood out were the cameras. They were everywhere. In the hallway, the living room, the kitchen, the garage. Outside on every corner of the house, covering the driveway, the backyard, even the side yard near the woods. There was a camera pointed at the kitchen table, for God's sake. I must have looked uncomfortable because the husband explained it before I could ask. "We sell firearms out of the home," he said flatly. "Side business. Insurance requires the cameras." I nodded. It made sense, I guess. Still felt like overkill. The dogs, at least, were sweet. 2 medium-sized mutts, both older and mellow. They had a doggy door in the back so they could come and go as they pleased, which the couple said made things easy. By the end of the tour, I'd convinced myself it was fine. Weird couple, sure. But the job was simple. Feed the dogs, let them out, keep an eye on things. A week would go by fast. I agreed to do it. They left on a Tuesday morning. I showed up around 10 with my laptop, a duffel bag, and enough snacks to survive a week without leaving. The house felt different when I was alone. Bigger, quieter. I set up my workspace in their office, a cluttered room with a heavy wooden desk and a large monitor mounted on the wall. That monitor, I realized, displayed all the camera feeds. 4 squares, each showing a different angle of the property. I could see the driveway, the backyard, the side of the house near the woods, the front porch. Honestly, it made me feel safer. Out there in the middle of nowhere, it was nice to have eyes on everything. The first night went fine. I worked until about 8, made myself dinner, and watched TV on their couch with the dogs curled up beside me. Around 11, I went to bed in their guest room, a small, plain room with a single window facing the backyard. I fell asleep fast. The second night was when things started. I was working late in the office, around 10 o'clock, when I glanced up at the monitor and noticed something. One of the camera feeds was black, the one watching the driveway. At first, I figured it was just the Wi-Fi. Out in rural areas, connections drop all the time. But something nagged at me. I got up and walked to the front door to check if maybe the camera had fallen or gotten knocked loose somehow. That's when I heard it. The dogs shot up from where they'd been lying in the hallway, and before I could react, they bolted for the doggy door. A second later, they were outside, barking like crazy. I froze. It was pitch black outside, and the dogs were going insane. I couldn't see what they were barking at, but I could hear them, both of them, focused on the same spot along the back fence, the part that faced the woods. My heart started pounding. I stood there for a minute, listening, trying to convince myself it was just a raccoon or a deer. But the way they were barking, it didn't sound like curiosity. It sounded like alarm. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and opened the back door. "Come here," I called, trying to sound calm. "Come on, let's go." They didn't budge. I stepped out onto the porch, shining the light toward the fence. The dogs were standing side by side, stiff and tense, staring into the trees. I couldn't see anything, just darkness and the faint outline of branches swaying in the wind. I called them again. louder this time, and finally, they turned and trotted back inside. I closed the door and locked it. Then I did something that, looking back, probably saved my life. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen, a heavy wooden one, and pushed it in front of the doggy door. It took effort to move, and once it was in place, I knew there was no way the dogs could get out. I even took a picture of it with my phone, just to be sure. Then I went to bed, though I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I woke up later than usual. The sun was already up, and I could hear birds outside. For a second, everything felt normal. Then I realized the house was too quiet. I sat up and looked around. The dogs weren't at the foot of the bed where they usually slept. I called their names. Nothing. I got out of bed and walked through the house, checking the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. They weren't inside. My stomach dropped. I walked to the back door and looked out into the yard. There they were, both of them, just sniffing around, doing their thing. And that's when it hit me. How did they get outside? I'd blocked the doggy door. I'd wedged that heavy chair right up against it. There was no way they could have moved it. I turned slowly and looked at the corner of the room. The chair was sitting there, 5 feet away from the door. The blood drained from my face. I pulled out my phone and opened the picture I'd taken the night before. There it was. Clear as day. That chair pressed firmly against the doggy door. Someone had moved it. Someone had been in the house while I was asleep. I called Clara immediately, barely able to get the words out. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes, and I stood by the front door the entire time, watching the driveway, my hand on the doorknob, ready to bolt. When she arrived, we went through the house together. Every room, every closet, under every bed. Nothing. No one. Clara tried to reassure me. "Maybe you didn't push it as far as you thought," she said gently. "Or maybe one of the dogs nudged it enough to squeeze through." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I knew what I'd done, and I knew what I'd seen. After she left, I went back to work, but I couldn't concentrate. Every creak, every gust of wind, every shadow felt like a threat. By the time night came again, I was on edge, and that's when the cameras went out. I was sitting in the office around 8 o'clock, trying to focus on work, when I glanced up at the monitor. All 4 camera feeds were black. Not one, not 2, all of them. My hands went cold. I stared at the screen, waiting for them to flicker back on. They didn't. I texted the couple immediately. "Hey, just wanted to let you know your cameras are all down. Do you want me to try to reset them or check the router?" I waited. 5 minutes, 10, 20. No response. By 10 o'clock, I was pacing. I kept glancing at the monitor, hoping one of the feeds would come back. But the screen stayed black. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. A power surge, a bad connection, something simple. But my gut told me otherwise. Around 11:30, I was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it again. The dogs. They jumped up and ran to the doggy door, barking and scratching to get out. I sat up, my heart racing. Not again. I grabbed the knife I'd started keeping beside me and walked to the back door. The dogs were already outside, barking at the same spot along the fence. I stood there, frozen, straining to see anything in the darkness. Then I heard it. A thump. From the other side of the house. My blood ran cold. The dogs stopped barking. They were just sniffing now, wandering along the fence line like whatever they'd sensed was gone. I whistled for them, and after a tense moment, they came trotting back inside, I slid the chair in front of the doggy door again. This time, I took another picture, just to be sure. Then I walked slowly toward the back room where I'd heard the thump. I stood in the hallway, just outside the door, and I felt it. That presence. You know how sometimes you can just tell someone's in a room with you, even if they're not making a sound? That's what it felt like. The air felt different, heavier. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. Silence. "What are you doing here?" Nothing. I even called out the couple's names, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd come home early and were playing some kind of sick joke. Still nothing. I backed out of the hallway, closed the door as quietly as I could, and locked it. Then I went back to the living room and sat on the couch with the dogs, my phone in one hand, the knife in the other. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? And say what? That I heard a noise? That I felt something? I'd sound insane. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from the wife. "Hi, don't worry about the cameras. You're safe." I stared at the message, my chest tightening. They were in Florida. It was almost 2 in the morning there. And what did she mean? You're safe? I hadn't said anything about safety. I'd only mentioned the cameras. Before I could respond, another text came through. Also, can you make sure I didn't leave the garage door open to the inside? I don't want anything getting in. The garage door, the one in the back room, the room I just locked. I didn't respond. I just sat there, staring at my phone, my hands trembling. 2 minutes later, another text. "Hi, I know it's late, but can you please check on this for me? I'm worried." My stomach turned. I didn't want to go back there. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to. But what if something had gotten in? What if that's what I heard? I stood up slowly, knife in hand, and walked back to the hallway. As I reached for the door, I heard it. A shuffle. From inside the room. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. My phone lit up again. "I see you're up. Can you please go in and check?" "I see you're up." The cameras. They had access to the cameras. They were watching me. Right now. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. But I couldn't just stand there. They were watching. I unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly, keeping my body as far back as possible. The room was dark, but I could see the outline of the door to the garage. It was open. Just a crack. I took a step forward, my phone buzzing again with another message. The light from the screen gave me just enough to see. And that's when I saw it. An arm, pressed against the wall, right next to the doorway. Someone was standing there, in the darkness, waiting. I didn't think. I just ran. I slammed the door shut, locked it, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and bolted out the front door. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. As my headlights turned on, the garage door started rolling up. And in the light, I saw him. A man. Crouched in the back corner behind a box, right next to the door I was supposed to close. I threw the car in reverse and floored it down the driveway. I drove straight to the police station, barely able to breathe, tears streaming down my face. I told the officer everything. The cameras going out, the noises, the man in the garage. He radioed for a unit to check the house and told me to wait. I sat in my car in the parking lot, texting the wife frantically. There was someone in the house. I saw him in the garage. I'm at the police station. No response. 30 minutes later, the officer came back and told me the house was clear. No signs of a break-in. The garage door was open, but there was no one inside. They'd checked the perimeter, the woods, everything. Nothing. He could see I was terrified, so he offered to follow me back and do another sweep with me there. I watched as they checked every room, every closet, every corner. No one. By the time they left, it was almost 4 a.m. I collapsed on the couch, the knife still in my hand, too afraid to sleep. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Hi, plans changed. We'll be home soon. You can go home now." That was it. No acknowledgement of what I'd told her, no concern, no explanation, just, "You can go home now." I didn't wait. I grabbed my stuff and left. The house was on a rural road, about a quarter-mile from the main street. As I pulled away and reached the stop sign, I glanced in my rearview mirror. A car with no headlights pulled into the driveway. I grabbed my phone and texted the wife. "Someone just pulled into your driveway." The reply came instantly. "I know. I know." My blood went cold. They'd been there the whole time. The cameras going offline, the noises, the man in the garage. They were setting me up. They'd been circling the property, watching, waiting. And I'd been inside, completely unaware. I never heard from them again. Clara apologized over and over, saying she had no idea. She said after that night, the couple stopped coming into the diner. She never saw them again either. I'm 30 now. It's been years since that night. But I still think about it. I think about how close I came to opening that door, to stepping into that garage, to being alone with whoever was waiting for me in the dark. I think about the chair, the cameras, the texts. I think about the fact that they knew I was up, that they were watching me, guiding me, pushing me towards something I'll never fully understand. And I think about the fact that I'll never know what they were planning, what they wanted, or what would have happened if I'd stayed just a little bit longer. Some questions don't have answers, and maybe that's the most terrifying part of all. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you have your own story, drop it in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you want more true stories like this, check out the video on your screen right now. Stay safe out there.